All right, so my name is Marcus Ruffin. I'm a senior manager for Capital One in charge of tool optimization and automation. So recent graduate to the management people leader role, so definitely interested in hearing some more from my colleagues.
Awesome. And I'm Ted Sanders. I'm a business information security officer at Bank of America. I'm also an adjunct professor, mentor, advisor, a whole bunch of other things, and I'm glad to be here on the panel as well to participate.
And I'm Tia Hopkins. I'm the Chief Cyber Resilience Officer and Field Chief Technology Officer at eCentire. I am also an adjunct professor and a lot of things that I'll share later, so we can get into this.
Okay, awesome. So this, for this next hour, we're talking about, the theme is, there is nothing comfortable about being a cybersecurity professional. And when I saw that topic, one of the things that popped in my mind was a concept I had read about that comes from cognitive science. There's this concept of kind learning environments and unkind learning environments. And I remember when I first read it, it was like, these unkind learning environments, sounds like cybersecurity. And the characteristics are, in an unkind learning environment, feedback is not immediate. You put in, your access controls, today, so you don't have a hack tomorrow. That doesn't mean you're not going to have a hack next week, right? So that feedback about how well your controls is working, right? It's not an immediate thing. Another characteristic of a kind learning environment is that patterns repeat. If you do something once, you do that same thing again, it's going to work exactly the same way. Things don't work like that in cyber because the threat landscape is always changing, all right? And in a kind learning environment, your previous experience, right, improves, learning. So, things, you always have this cycle of, okay, we've learned this, now this fits into this. Now, that, again, doesn't happen in cyber. So I was, just wondering, do you agree or disagree with this, characterization? Or do you have another take on, why cybersecurity is an inherently uncomfortable field?
I want to jump right in right off the bat and add another dimension to this, and that is the business is also always changing, right? So this is an asymmetric change because it's not linear, right? It's multidimensional, and I think the fatigue that sets in is largely because you're having to try to track all of this at once, right? So I do agree with your assertion that it is definitely an unkind thing, and I think one of the challenges is kind of settling into a notion that you have to abstract yourself from the chaos, right? I think that's one of the things that I've learned in my journey is that I can see the train wreck, but I can be centered in myself and respond. So there's a lot of kind of research that goes into, military training, even first responders, right? Because they have to remain calm in high pressure situations when things are very chaotic, right? And others may be reacting very strongly, but they have to find ways to center themselves, maybe breathing exercises, mindfulness exercises. And I can tell you, if any of you have worked in incident response or incident management, that's part of the job, right? And so that's my perspective. I'd love to hear from Tia or someone else.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I completely agree with you. But the chaos of cybersecurity is actually what I enjoy. You never see the same thing twice. We try not to trip over the same rock more than once, but we do all the time, albeit for different reasons when it happens. But I wanted to point out something that you said, kind of double down on the fact that you do have to abstract yourself from that chaos, but it's a skill. And I actually took that for granted because it comes naturally to me, because of my background and the things that I've gone through, because of who I am. I've seen way worse than the things that happen. from a cybersecurity perspective. And so when those things happen, I'm like, oh, okay, y'all freaking out about this. All right, let's just breathe. And that also carries over to the strategic element of cybersecurity, not just living in the weeds and the tactical when things are blowing up. It is not infrequent that I'm in a room full of people that need to set a strategy for what the business is going to do to protect itself or to be resilient, but 80 to 90% of the people in the room can't see the forest through the trees. Like they're trying to solution. It's what if this and what if that and all the reasons that something could go wrong instead of the one reason that it can. So being steady and level-headed is critical to being able to solve problems, but also to prevent burnout, because that is really real and can come really fast if you get sucked up into the chaos in a negative way in the industry.
No, that's very, first let me quickly recap. So Ted, basically first pointed out the fact that we have this unkind learning environment that is set in this unpredictable business climate. And I think, gosh, I'll forget what all the acronym stands for, but the VUCA world, right? You have the volatile, it's unpredictable, constantly changing, and the A, I forget. But this is the business climate that we operate in, right? But being able to center yourself, and Sears, kind of delved, further into that idea, right? Of really looking at the big picture. So they're saying, like, don't just be lost in the forest, try and take that step back and look at the really big picture. So I think that's very important. And Marcus, over to you.
Oh, yeah. So once again, I agree wholeheartedly. Like, to me, I'm constantly organizing chaos. It's the business changing API gateways while I'm trying to automate at the same time. It's people changing passwords and breaking things and things going down and trying. It's just constant chaos, but I think it's all about just standing there, really kind of orienting yourself and just trying to figure things out one step at a time, making sure that the business understands that you have things under control. And then, like I said, putting out the fires, right? You're constantly firefighting. That's literally my new job. I used to be the guy, and Mary knows this. She pushed me into this stuff, so I blame you. But I used to be the hands on the keys, but now I honestly feel like I'm more of a people wrangler. So.
Okay. I wanted to change my title to C3, Chief Chaos Coordinator, but my business wouldn't have it.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. But, so I can't remember who said this yesterday, but just talking about thinking of the stakes, like what is at stake? Like, is there a life at stake? Was it Mary? Yeah, that was Mary. And I remember, I had a manager who used to say that, something similar as well, and would say, oh, we're not saving lives here, when we start fretting about this deadline, or we need to get this report in. But along the way, right, see that some systems are really critical. Like when you think about the impact, maybe it's tied to something that is saving somebody's life. There's, think of cyber war, right? Nation states going at each other. So there are times that things can be really high stakes, and just wondering if you could share, any experience you've had, that was high stakes, or that you had to help characterize, what was at stake and get people out of, the weeds, or get them into the right headspace, when dealing with an incident, or, some projects, right, process. There's so many things, constantly happen, right? And we always have our business partners coming up with new ideas for what they want to do, right? Oh, we want to roll out this new program. It's like, have you looked at all the impact and potential impact of that?
Yes, I have a good one, actually. So I used to work in oil and gas, and one thing that we were doing was we were rolling out new AV, new EDR. And, in order to do a lot of that, you got to mess with firewalls. So while we were messing with firewalls, someone touched something on the OT environment side, and it just wasn't good. So when working in oil and gas, you have a number. We had a number on the wall, and every time a plant was not pumping gas, or they weren't pumping gas out of the ground, we were losing X amount of money. So once again, I had to come in and kind of bring up that risk. Like, hey, if we touch any of these, put EDR on any of these systems, they were old. They were sitting there. They had never been touched. And literally, they probably had a sign on that says, "Do not touch." And we were gonna disobey, throw EDR on it, and ultimately potentially take down that system, which was gonna cost us $10 million an hour. So, at the end of the day, we wound up leaving it alone. But it takes people to really understand the business along with the cyber and understand that there's another safeguard we can put in place in order to achieve the same goal without potentially, losing tens of millions of dollars per day. So.
Now, I heard something very important in there. You were talking about understanding the business,
Absolutely.
right? And okay, now I'm actually going to pivot. I did not have this question planned. But often in cybersecurity, we're stuck in the technical details, right? And we have this the reputation of being, the department of no, right? So what advice do you have, for people in cybersecurity? What do you do in terms of understanding the business, being able to speak the business language, and being able to say, hey, if you do this, the impact is $10 million, per day, right?
I would like to jump in if that's cool. So I think 2 bits of advice from me would be to master the art of storytelling and build relationships. Because when you build relationships, it makes cross-functional collaboration a lot easier. I think about the business unit looking at the security team as the department of no, and the security team looking at the business unit as you guys just don't get it. And really what it comes down to is those 2 teams don't understand each other, right? In theory, everyone's got the same outcome in mind. We want to protect the business. We want to, drive revenue, or whatever it is that we're there to do. But the paths of the 2 teams are very different, and they have competing priorities, and they just need to understand each other in order to basically speak a common language, right, and get to the destination. So relationship building helps a lot with that. And then to the point of very technical details needing to be translated into business speak, mastering the art of storytelling. So when you are a security leader, you don't go into a room full of non-technical business leaders and say, that firewall blocked like 20,000 threats last month, and our click rate is up 5%, and because they're going to look at you like, what?
Exactly.
So you have to speak the language of who you're speaking to. Don't speak bits and bytes to someone that's listening in dollars and cents, right? And it's up to you to learn the business so you can understand what that translation of bits and bytes to dollars and cents needs to be, and that's when they start to pick up what you're putting down, and you get the buy-in, and you get more responsibility, and you get to move your program forward. Because the biggest thing business leaders are missing when technical leaders speak to them is value. And that is often not articulated. What is the value that we are protecting? What is the return on this investment? Because if you're asking me to spend $1 million to protect $100,000 in asset, I'm gonna take the risk. So I need to understand the risk, and I need to understand what is being protected so that I can invest. So build relationships so you can get that context, and then master the art of storytelling so you can communicate what you need to communicate.
Wow, how often have we heard during this conference to build relationships? Right. No, seriously, who hasn't heard that message yet? No hands? No, put down that. Well, I really loved, actually somebody note this down for me, please. Okay. I loved what you said, that quote. I just want to preserve that quote. You said, don't speak bytes and bits and bytes when the others are speaking dollars and cents. I really love that. And storytelling, storytelling. Last year, right, that came up as well. Storytelling as being something key, and it was something I learned in a course recently as well. That storytelling is how adults, like we're human beings, we process stories. That's our natural state. So if you want to communicate with adults, you need to do it through stories. So that is very, very important. Thank you for sharing. Now, all this, so many things that make this field uncomfortable, right? I feel like another, aspect is that the job is never quite done. Never say, you put in the firewall, right? You put in the firewall and now we're safe, we're done. I put in the access controls and now we're done, we're safe. There's really nothing, nobody has discovered that silver bullet yet. And I work in compliance, right? And people would always say, hey, compliance is not security. It is true, but I don't like it because we do want, we have this, if we follow ISO 27001, then we're certified, and we got our PCI DSS, we followed, we checked all the boxes. I want it to mean that it is getting us towards a secure, state. But the reality is that it is never done. And I think it's like this cognitive dissonance, right? It creates stress, It's like this mental load on us. How do you cope with this?
It's the $1 million question, huh?
Yeah, seriously, I don't even know where I'm going with that. But I wish, that I'm hoping maybe you have an answer, you have an answer. Because I want to know, how do you cope with the fact that we work in this field where our work is just never done?
Wow.
You don't? No.
Well, one thing, we have job security for now until the AI, the bots, replace us all, right? That's really a challenging question. I think what I try to do from a mental solace standpoint is to console myself with the fact that every day is going to offer a new set of challenges. And to Tia's point, for all of you who want to be in the seats we're in, you're going to have to embrace that. And if you happen to just be wired the way she is, where you just love it, then the more the merrier, right? But to me, for me, it's like a game of whack-a-mole, right? It feels like some days there are fewer moles to hit, but they're still there, right? What I try to do is to break things up into smaller pieces, not to try to solve all the problems right away, because as you already said, they'll probably be different tomorrow anyway. So really, being mindful of the fact that, okay, these are the things that I can't control within my sphere of influence. Leveraging trust, leveraging relationships, my technical acumen and know-how, my business acumen, and let's try to get these wins today or this week, right? And then knowing that I need to recharge this weekend because Monday morning, sometimes even Sunday night, my emails, if I get my weekend, right, they're gonna be more challenges, right? And I think it's just part of it. I don't think there's a real way to say, well, you're gonna escape that. You just learn to manage it.
Yeah, I think the job security is definitely a benefit, right?
Yeah. But I think what you said is important, acknowledging that you're never done. If you go into a cybersecurity role, whether it's individual contributor or leadership saying, I'm going to finish today, you're automatically setting yourself up for failure because you're never done. And so when you accept that, then you process things differently, right? You're not trying to reach a destination. You're acknowledging that the career you've chosen is a constant journey. And so just as the threat landscape is evolving and the business is changing and users have bad days, well, at the same time, the information we learned 6 months ago is dated, and we got to keep our skills up to date, so you can never really rest in any aspect of it because you're only as good as the last thing you do, right? It only takes you saying some silly thing and all of a sudden, your credibility is gone. It's a very unforgiving industry. And so that's the way I cope with it. I'm like, I set my boundaries. I'm relentless with my time. I time block because you have to be able to focus. It is very, very, very easy to get distracted because there's always something, everything, everywhere, all at once. And so you have to be relentless with your time, structured with your time, but set boundaries. Leave room for when things happen, right? Leave space for, hey, this meeting might run over, or look, I know the kind of day I'm gonna have today. I might have to work an extra hour or two, but you have to do those things, or you'll find yourself working 14, 15, 16 hours a day, and wondering why your hair looks like mine after only doing it, only being in the industry for a couple of years. So, right, it is about acceptance and planning and setting boundaries and acknowledging that there is no destination. It's a journey.
I have one more thing to add to that, because I agree with everything you guys have already said. I think the thing that also helps me is I love learning, right? And I think this is one of maybe a few fields where you will never stop learning, right? And if you just don't think of it as like, oh, I have another problem or another thing, like I have a new opportunity to learn something new. So if you think about it that way, then it doesn't seem as stressful as it actually is, right? But it's an opportunity to learn something new.
Okay, great. So what I'm hearing, one is acceptance. It is what it is. And there's a book that I read beginning of this year called Meditation for Mortals. And one of the things it said, is about having this very long to-do list every day. It's like this frustration, like I never get through my to-do list. And said you have to accept that you will never get through your to-do list. And once you accept you will never get through your to-do list, you'll start getting more things done.
That's right. That's it.
And the other thing I'm hearing is that cybersecurity, like life, is a journey and not a destination. So we're never done, and it's just the way it is. Okay. Now, so we can never get risk, and this is on the same theme, right? So we never get that risk level down to 0, no matter what, right? And
Come on. Somebody's done it, right?
yeah, I mean, so actually, you know what? There's this story that kind of plays in my head every now and then when I think about the subject of risk and trying to get it to 0. And I think about, that when fire was first discovered, I bet that there were, all these different tribes of people in the jungle, and then they discovered fire and they started teaching themselves how to use fire. And some people must have had some accidents, like in some tribe. Maybe, they burnt up a whole family. And they must have banned, and then they must have come together and said, hey, if anybody ever uses fire in this village again, we're going to ban that person. We're going to ostracize that person. And I was like, so I said, I bet some villages must have done that, right? They must have said, never, ever use fire. But I was like, where are they? They cease to exist. So that's what comes to my mind when I think of getting, risk down to 0. But, in the workspace, right, it's like, oh, there's a new project, or we're bringing a new vendor on, and you have to look at what the risk, you have to kind of predict, what could go wrong, do they have the right controls in place? But there's always this, what if you missed something, and, it's, there's a breach, and it's like, oh, Omi, you should have thought to, check this thing out. You should have. So what strategies, could you share with us, with others in the room here to, reach a balance? Like, what is an acceptable level of, risk reduction? How do you get to that point?
Well, the last question there is hard, because the acceptable level of risk is going to be according to the business. That is defined by business executives, if you're lucky, because sometimes they don't, and they still expect good outcomes. But I mean, I think in today's environment where we're moving way faster than we've ever moved, transformation is happening much faster than we can handle. Yes, we make decisions based on risk, but our mindset needs to be resilience, because we're never going to get the risk down to 0. There's always going to be something that we didn't think of, and so we always have to have that mindset of what's the worst that could happen. We've done our due diligence. We know as much as we think we can know at this point, but to what we've been saying up here, there's always going to be an opportunity for learning, because there's always going to be something that someone hasn't done yet. There's always a rock that someone hasn't seen. And so my strategy, obviously do your due diligence, get the right controls in place, get the right policies, documentation, all of the things that we've been doing for a very long time, but also be ready for anything. So I talk to a lot of organizations that don't have a resilient strategy. They do their risk management, they make their risk decisions, they get their mitigations in place if that's what they chose to do, and they're like, okay, we're good. And that's when things blow up. right, with that false sense of confidence. And the one thing that comes to mind, and I'll shut up, is AI. You know, the requirement for business innovation is outpacing our ability as security professionals to understand what we're actually dealing with. The World Economic Forum conducted a survey of about 400 companies across 57 countries, right? They're business leaders and some CISOs, and 37% of those respondents said that they do not have policies or an approach in place for assessing AI before they deploy it. And it doesn't mean they're not deploying it. They're deploying it anyway. It just means that they don't know what they're doing, but they have to do it anyway. And technology and innovation is going to continue to advance exponentially. And so we have to put ourselves in a world of, I got to be ready for anything, not just I'm ready for the risk that I was able to identify.
Yeah, well stated. So AI is the fire, right? And in your analogy there. You know, I want to add to that. I think there's another part and dimension of sort of understanding potential impacts in a resilience strategy, and I love that point. But it's also understanding that, you know, there are certain risk dimensions that are sort of emerging, right? And that you've got to be okay that you're not going to have the full picture, right? And then determine, okay, what is the minimum sort of healthy environment that I can operate and innovate in that's within my risk appetite, right? I heard an executive tell me one time, he said, you know, I want to be the first to innovate or the first to market, but I don't want to be the first to fail, right? Now, how do you make those two things coexist, right? Especially in this new world that we're living in where, you know, companies are under a lot of pressure to deliver value for customers, and customer demand's at the center of this, right? Even from like a digital strategy standpoint, you know, I work in banking and finance, and, you know, we see the day that the traditional banking center will eventually go away, right? Because the idea of going to a place to conduct financial transactions is going away, right? Everything's on your phone, right? And so we're trying to determine, okay, well, how do you do that in an AI-enabled world where AI is on every device, right? And users, customers can put whatever data they want, including their bank account information, into AI, right? Like, how do you manage for that? It overflows the boundaries of a traditional control plane, right? So my point in saying that is you're going to have to, almost like we said, be comfortable being a little uncomfortable until that innovation curve levels off and we are able to catch up and wrap controls around it in a responsible way.
Okay, no, that's a very important point. And I mean, I like to think about it, as I said, you know, compliance, we love our frameworks.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, so, you know, but in a way, they're not perfect, right? And actually, my CISO said, you know, I shouldn't refer to them as best practices, you should say leading practices. But, you know, their frameworks, they help guide, and it's kind of collective intelligence. Yes. But you have to think about it within your own context and how you're going to apply it. And then you have to think about, if this thing does go sideways and it's in a court of law, is it going to look like I did the right things at the point in time with the information that I had? Right.
You bring up a good point. I actually had a customer, we did a penetration test for them, and it was underprivileged, so we're working with their attorneys. And we got the results back, and, you know, they got some criticals and some highs, some mediums, some lows, and they kept pushing on us to soften the language instead of saying, hey, you need to go do this now. Well, it would be nice if you considered doing these things. And I'm like, well, no, because you need to go do these things. You know, there were some trade-offs we made, like on the mediums and lows, but on the criticals and highs, like, we would be held accountable. And the whole purpose of the request was, to your point, if it goes before a court of law, they don't want to look like they were negligent. So they were trying to get us to change it to language that would prevent them from appearing negligent. So apparently the struggle is real.
Oh, and yeah, massaging language. I remember during my SOX testing days, you know, counting deficiencies. It was a game, right? You could bunch up like, you know, 10 deficiencies into one. It's like, oh yeah, you know, we reduced the number of deficiencies. So, you know, the language game is, it's real. Tia, you touched on something, you know, earlier. You talked about the pace of business innovation, right? And us barely able to, you know, to keep up, right? And often, you know, you have, you know, business executives, they go out, they might get, you know, outsource get some outsourced firm, to this project out without informing, security, right? And sometimes security is,
The last to know.
right. The last to know.
Oh, we moved to the cloud yesterday? Really? Oh, wow. Okay.
Exactly. But yet, maybe, you have your CISO, and if something goes bust, oh yeah, the CISO is the one who's going to be responsible, like held responsible, right? So, how do you deal with, these situations when you find that the business, they have already gone ahead, they have already executed, something without the appropriate level of controls?
In my world, it doesn't happen as frequently as it used to, so that's a good thing. But I will tell you this, it kind of goes back to what we said earlier about relationship management. Because a lot of times I've seen in my career that the business will sometimes ignore security when they feel like there's not trust. Or when they feel, as you said earlier, we're the captains of no, right? And so we've had to pivot in how we approach advisory work, specifically in the Deputy CISO office, to saying, okay, let me understand what problem you're trying to solve. And instead of a hard no, let's say this would be even better if, right? So there's a negotiation that has to happen, because at the end of the day, I'm fully aware that we're a cost center, right? Like, we are a cost of doing business. And sometimes there are very high-powered conversations where the business says, well, listen, we see certain revenue at stake, and we have a deadline, and we need to hit this deadline. And so then the ball comes back in our court to determine, okay, well, how do we do that in a reasonably safe manner, right? Now, if they've already done it, sometimes things have to be pulled out of production, and that's just a real thing. And we've had to do that. We've had to say, look, this application, it will go down over the weekend for patches or whatever controls that you didn't put in place to be put in. But we still do that in a consultative way and in a way that hopefully builds an ally and a partner versus an enemy. So.
Okay, so those relationships, very important to everybody.
So I'll add something to that too, because I had that happen to me just recently. Look at it as an opportunity, right? So you have the higher C levels, and I'm still kind of middle management, right? But I think one thing that I've always done is I try to think about what they're going to come up with before they do, so that when they come to me and say, "Oh, we got another cloud environment we need to secure," oh, doesn't matter, plug and play, right? I built it the way it should have been built, where you can just plug that new environment in. You now have alerts, and everything's done for you. So look at everything as an opportunity, and just say, hey, you know what are they going to do next? What's the possibility? And if I can be ahead of the game, then guess what? Now you're the go-to guy. You're the A-lister, right?
Yeah.
So that's what you should be doing every day. Is how can I make my manager look good to his manager? And if you can do that, you will always have a job.
No, that is, that's a very good point. Embrace the challenge and deal with it.
Yeah. Can I just? So what you said made me think of something that I think is really important that a lot of leaders and individual contributors forget about in security. If you take any exam, you've seen that whole need to balance security and functionality so the business can produce. But what we also have to balance is protecting the business and enabling the business. It's not just about protecting the business. If you're so focused on protecting the business that you don't consider what the business needs to be enabled, you could quickly find yourself in a position of disabling the business, and that's not good for anyone. So to your point, anticipating the needs of the business, I know so many people that have been in technical roles in companies, they've been there for 10, 15 years and could not tell you how their company makes money or how their company produces or what type of customers they target. Understanding the business will help you anticipate the needs of the business, and maybe it's you presenting ideas to the business before they even come up with them. That really makes your boss look good, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we often think of, security solely from the standpoint of protect, but you're saying protect and enable. I love that. Shifting gears a little bit, let's go back to like us as individuals. So, talked about the pace of change, new technology, everything, which all necessitates, that we're learning as fast as we can. We're trying to keep up with the business. We're trying to learn not just the technology, not just cybersecurity, but also how the business works, right? And so growing itself, right, and stretching yourself is inherently uncomfortable. So how do you, in your careers, cope with that, or either cope or embrace the discomfort of growing and stretching?
I embrace. I am very hard on myself. I have a challenger mentality. I challenge everyone, but the first person I challenge every day is myself. Anytime I take on a new role, the first thing I do is assess my gaps. And I don't get too high on myself or too low on myself, because the reality is, if it's a new role, it's something that I've never done before. So it's a growth opportunity the moment that I step into it. So I have to embrace it and realize that I'm in the role because there are strengths that I have, and I need to leverage those strengths while I bridge those gaps that I have. So I definitely embrace it. I also get really bored if I get stagnant. So if I'm not growing, then something is very, very, very wrong. And that's why curiosity is so big in this industry. You can never relax and feel like you know all there is to know. You have to be curious. And I learned this very early into my career. I asked someone a question that should have known the answer. They gave me the wrong answer. I took their advice and it blew up on me. And so now I am a question machine. Even if it makes sense, I'm going to ask you 10 more questions just to make sure I'm sure. And I wrap with, something I tell myself all the time is being smart gets you noticed, but being informed keeps you relevant. So don't get too high on your own supply and think, mama, I made it, because the industry will quickly leave you behind if you don't put a concerted effort into keeping up.
I want to build on that. I am wired the same way. I have an insatiable appetite for more knowledge. I want to talk about community, though, right, and the importance of partnership in your growth and development. Early on, I kind of had the same mindset. I went into a role and I said, okay, where are the gaps? Or sometimes the roles pulled me into the gaps, right? I fell into it, and it's like, oh my God, I got 18 months to remediate all these findings. I got to figure out how to do this, right? But over the period of that, I learned that, okay, I needed to start building a network, right, of people who were like-minded and who were also hungry and thirsty for knowledge. And we started these sort of parallel journeys where as we're both going down these paths, we're also influencing and informing, and the growth starts to become exponential because you are now multiplying that force versus a single person. You now have others that are adding to that experience. So I want to express and build on that and say it's also important to do that in concert with others who are also growth-oriented and moving in the same direction.
For me, technology. Technology. I'm the technology guy who's forced into people leadership, right? Just to be honest. But it's technology. I call her Maxine. So Maxine, and now you know who Maxine is. Maxine is my ChatGPT. And we have conversations every day. Every single day. I read something in the news and I say, oh man, tell me more about this. Tell me more about that. Can you give me notes on this article? Give me this, give me that. So I'm constantly learning. Embrace technology. It will help coping with anything. Like you get a new job. I got to learn about 3 different cloud environments. I only know 2, right? So I got to figure out the 3rd one, and I got to figure it out quick. ChatGPT. So, that's me. I solve everything with technology. So.
No, that's an awesome tip, because I don't think it's been up to a month, since I actually picked up on that strategy of using ChatGPT. Say, oh, I'm trying to learn this topic. Now, ask me this question, so I'll query it. Or even, because I'm in this program and I'm trying to get through a ton of books. Found out I don't have the time to get into everything. And, oh gosh, class is tomorrow. I need to internalize this content somehow. So I was like, okay, based on the content of this book, here are the, key topics, here are the, key things I want to focus on. What are the things I need to know? And then I would ask follow-up questions. And, my ChatGPT has become a very close friend.
You got to make sure you check it, though. Don't just trust everything you see.
Absolutely.
But, double check.
Yes.
But it can be helpful.
Absolutely.
It's going to change the way we work, too.
Oh, yeah.
In good ways and in kind of scary ways. I mean, I built a web app yesterday, and I'm not a coder, and it works. And Claude helped me do it step by step. The challenge I always had is I have great ideas, and I can write requirements like the best of them, but then I had to hand it off to somebody that is a coder, but typically doesn't speak the same language that I speak. But ChatGPT has enabled, I use Claude when I'm coding, but Claude has enabled me to do that. But why I say it's going to change the way we work is I used to feel like I was doing the job of 10 people. Now I feel like it's still not healthy, but now I feel like I'm only doing the job of 5 because ChatGPT helps me do it a lot faster. But us being able to work faster means that expectations are going to start to shift in what we're doing in the workplace. And so I hear a lot of comments around, oh, AI is going to replace people, AI is going to take people's jobs. I mean, there's some things that AI is going to do that people just no longer need to do, just like, you have self-checkout at the grocery store. Maybe we don't need as many cashiers. But I don't think AI is going to massively replace everyone. AI is going to replace people that refuse to use AI. So if you're not doing it, do it. Just find a use case and go, and you'll be surprised where you end up.
I want to say one thing. SOC simulation tomorrow, that whole entire thing was built by AI. So whatever you see tomorrow, all AI.
Oh, awesome. So I do want, to save some time for questions, but I want to ask one last question. So on Sunday at Top Golf, Ted and I were talking, and he asked me, what do I like about my job? And I said, well, I like the ability to anticipate what could go wrong and put preventive measures, from a control standpoint. That's like exercising some control over this unpredictable space, right? And I didn't get a chance to ask you what you liked about your job because we had to go take pictures and event was over. So I decided I'm going to ask, and I'll ask each one of you. So I'll ask Ted first, what do you like about your job?
So there are a couple of things. The first thing I like about my job is every day I get to literally influence the tech strategy of one of the largest banks in the world, right? That's a privilege. I consider that an honor, right? I don't take that lightly because, number one, I know the amount of assets we have under management, but I also think about it because I'm also a customer, right? So for me, it's about kind of embracing the gravity of that and seeing the privilege and the honor in that. And it drives me to try to be excellent every day, right? When I show up, I want to bring the best version of me to that conversation because I realize the impact. And the second thing, it goes back to the continuous learning because we are in a position where we are rapidly transforming, like most industries. And I'm being exposed to technology and to conversations that I would have never dreamed would have been possible. And that excites my intellectual curiosity again. And I get back into this learning cycle that I find myself in. And so those are the two things that really, I enjoy the most about what I do. Yeah.
No, that is great. Marcus, what about you?
I would say problem solving. I am a problem solver at heart, right? And in this field, there is a ton of problems, right? So every day you come in, you get to solve a new problem. And I think the flip side of that is you also get to see like the transformation after the fact. So especially in this new role that I have now where I'm doing automation, it's like, all right, I want you to come in and automate. So we're seeing efficiency gains all over the place, right? We're able to do more with less. We're able to cut times for this and that. So being able to like see what you're producing and what you're giving to the company, I just really enjoy it. So.
Okay, that's great. And Tia?
I love the problem-solving aspect of it as well. I love puzzles. I love the hard things. If you asked me how to get from here to there, I'd struggle with it a lot more than if you asked me how to get from here to somewhere 2 miles away from here with lots of traffic and windy roads. That's just the way I'm wired. Easy is hard for me. But I do love that every day I get to turn chaos into music for somebody, somewhere. Whether it's a CISO that's just struggling to change culture or needs guidance on industry trends or whatever that is, the level of influence that I have in my role, because at my company I am responsible for strategy and vision, and so I'm always like on the bleeding edge and everybody's always looking at me like I have 5 heads, but I like being out there. I like the comfort that I have found in the discomfort that is my role. So I've gotten incredibly comfortable with being uncomfortable. In fact, when I get too comfortable, I start to itch a little bit. So I definitely love that. And the last thing is, you know, because I'm responsible for strategy, it's just really cool to have an idea and watch that idea go into this innovation chamber and then become a product and a service, but then it goes out into the industry and just changes the industry. It just started as something that popped into my head in the shower, and boom, it's an industry change. It's incredible. And so to that I say, no idea is too small, too weird. If you thought about it, there's something that you've seen that made you think about it, and somebody needs the solution that you have. So put it out there.
Okay, no, that is great. And I will add to mine, you know, just love the fact that it is never boring, right? There's always something exciting, always something new to learn, and that ability to influence across functions, right? Because we touch everything. We touch, cybersecurity touches every part of the organization.
Don't sleep on compliance.
At this time, you know, ask, are there any questions in the room? No questions? Oh, okay. Maybe. Do you know the mic?
All right, thank you guys. That was some wonderful presentation from you all. And the question is for you, actually. And being the CTO, right, I know you've undergone a lot of challenges in your role, right? And what is that one challenge that actually stood out with you up to this day? And how were you able to navigate it?
People.
Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
You know, when you're coming up in your career and kind of figuring out how people work, and you're looking at people in these executive roles, I think it's easy to make assumptions that things work a certain way. And then when you get into the rooms, you quickly learn that it's nothing like that. And so my challenge was being okay with the fact that people won't always care as much as I do. People won't always believe in me as much as I believe in myself. People will be jealous if my idea is better than theirs. They will be jealous just because of who I am and how I look. So people have been my greatest challenge. And it took a lot of soul searching in me, because I was a team no new friends, but you don't get very far in life that way. And so I had to get over myself. And then when I got to a place, the people stuff didn't bother me anymore. That's a them problem. That's not a me problem. I'm gonna show up, I'm gonna do what's right and do what I do. And then, I mean, you have a lot of things too, like people that might be titled higher than you, have more responsibility than you, and just don't know what they're doing, but take the position that they do, and they do it with confidence, so it works. So there are a lot of like technical challenge and solving problem challenges, but those are easy compared to what comes with people.
Hi, just a question around you all being people managers. From the standpoint of collecting metrics, what type of data do you like to see from your employees?
So from my standpoint, it all depends on the function, right? Obviously, that has a huge influence. But I'll go back to the business impact conversation again, right? Especially in the role that I occupy. I want to understand how what you're doing, right, is aggregated up at the team level. And then as the team lead or the director, I need to interpret that in the broader context, right? And it goes back to also when people think about like career development and telling your story, I always tell people, translate your successes into empirical data, right? Like show me how what you did saved money, made us safer, right? That to me is like foundational, and for you aspiring cybersecurity professionals, start thinking like that now, right? That's how you're gonna grow, that's how you're gonna tell your story, and that's how you're gonna get that next promotion. Because when you communicate in those terms, it makes it easier for your manager to go to bat for you, right? If you just say, hey, I did this, it's like, okay, what's the impact, right? Can you explain that to me? If the answer is no, go back and keep working on it, right?
That's a good resume tip.
So I'll add on to that. I recently had to go through like talent development discussions, right? We do that every single year, twice a year at least. And all you heard was the word impact at least 100 times, right? And if there was a statement that didn't show impact, the vice president was basically saying, so what? You did this thing, so what? What was the impact? So if you don't have impact statements that you're putting together for yourself, so what? That's what they're gonna say. So.
Yeah.
Oh, no, impact is very important. I remember years ago, I had a colleague, who said to me, oh, this year I attended this meeting, I attended that, I was on that committee. But I was like, but what did you achieve, right? That's so when you're present in the meeting, like, what's your contribution? I mean, there are some meetings that you're attending just to listen and learn. Acknowledge that, but that's not something you're going to take credit for.
Right.
When you can later show the learning, right, maybe that becomes something you take credit for. But just say, no, I attended this meeting. It's like, what was the impact?
And I want to add something. It just came to mind. One of the other ways you can do that is, as a security professional, even a preventative action, right? Translate that into the what if. Like, if I had not done this, we would have had this potential, like, loss event, right? Now I can say, oh, okay, Ted's valuable because he saved us $500,000 or $1 million worth of legal fees or whatever else would have happened had he not done X, Y, Z, right? So if you think about that on an individual level, it already gets you in the mindset that as you move up, you use that as you become a leader in the space as well. That same mindset.
Can I get a little controversial? Just a little bit?
Sure.
All right. Certifications. This was another thing. This was another thing that came up. So, a lot of times when you're talking to your employees, they go and they get certifications, right? And they'll have a whole list of all these certifications and everything on there. And it's amazing, right? They did a lot in that year. The leadership team is going to say, so what contributions from what they learned from those certifications have they applied here at work? If the answer is nothing, you just learned a whole lot, but you never applied anything, so what? And that's pretty big, right? So that was new to me, because I'm now in the room, and I'm like, oh, man, I gotta do more. But yes, certifications are great, but you have to actually apply it.
Right, and that just doesn't go to certifications, right? We've been talking about learning, right? You've got to learn. I mean, you're not just learning for it to sit in your head, right?
Yes.
Right? It needs to be applied. It needs to show in your work. So I think, certifications are a way to maybe concentrate or structure, your learning, but, it has to show.
Yeah.
I actually require that justification before I will approve for the company to pay for the certification. Because we don't pay in advance. We pay after you pass the test. So I'm not even going to approve you to go on that journey until you can tell me what this certification is going to do for your current role. Because I run a vulnerability management team, a dark web monitoring team, a bunch of stuff. If someone comes to me and says, hey, I want to go get my CISSP, well, tell me how that's going to help you be a better vulnerability manager. And if you can't tell me that, well, come back when you can.
Well, I hear your approach, but I'm sitting here disagreeing.
I got to manage my budget, okay?
There's only a certain amount of money
From
in
a
the cyber
budget.
budget.
Yeah, it makes sense. But like sometimes, it's like just encourage, the curiosity and the passion to learn. But, the expectation is that it will then translate into behavior, to translate into action. But yeah,
Translating to an outcome that
Outcomes,
aligns with
right,
her
impact.
strategy.
I will encourage free certifications.
Okay, cool. Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Simon. My question is about cybersecurity workforce. So in positions of leadership where now workforce is an important topic for you all, turnover, retention, and things like that, I know that's also an uncomfortable aspect of leadership within cybersecurity. Then whoever's most comfortable answering, if it's all of you, what are the challenges and the solutions you've come up with that? And I guess in general, if you just want to freeball it, I know I've seen one of your LinkedIn courses because I work in this kind of work myself, but I'm seeing that right now there's a lot of changes, lots of cut downs on organizations, lots of cutting of funding, and so I'm just curious when it comes to learning, development, and the workforce, what do those challenges look like now in this current environment?
You hit a nerve for me because I'm in my compensation planning cycle right now, and it's funny because it's the least favorite part of my job, but it's the most rewarding part of my job because it's when I get to recognize people on my team that are making an impact, making a difference on my team. But you have to make some hard decisions. The team that I've been leading for 2 years, and I've gone 2 years with no promotions and nothing above the standard merit increase. And so this year, I had some attrition, and I had the opportunity to make some strategic decisions to give some people pretty significant increases. But the strategic element of that is how I needed to position it to the business. Now, because I have relationships in the business, I'm able to go to bat for my team. If I don't have relationships, I'm useless to my team. Because I don't cry wolf all the time, and I'm not always overspending my budget, and I'm not always asking for extra dollars and doing things that the business doesn't make sense, when I make a stink, people listen. And so I was able to reward my team. I positioned it as proactive retention. The market is shifting. People are burning out. If I have to go hire new people because all my people left, one, they're going to be more expensive. Two, we're going to have to go backwards because we're going to have to bring all those people up to speed. And three, we're going to lose all the historical knowledge that those folks are taking with them. And so I say all the time, every call is a sales call. Every time I talk, I'm selling something to somebody, trying to get them to pick up what I'm putting down. And even when it comes to protecting and doing the right thing for my employees, it is an internal sales meeting like you can't even imagine. But when it comes to the way I build my team, if I have to go out and hire, I want to have a funnel. I don't want to have to go out and hire somebody that's going to cost me 6 figures. I want to give someone, well, I won't say 6 figures, but a lot of money, because these days, the work we do, everybody should make 6 figures. But I want to bring in someone that's new, someone that needs an opportunity, someone that can learn. So now my mid to senior resources can go do more interesting things, and I'm not worried about them quitting because they're burnt out and they're bored. And then I have this funnel that I'm creating. If one of them does take another opportunity, well, now I have this more junior person that's looking for an opportunity. So there's a lot of strategy that goes into just the people element, because you have the human resources aspect of it, and I have a global team, so I have to think about the laws in Canada and the laws in Europe and the laws in the US, and I can't treat everyone the same way. I can't hire the same way. I can't fire the same way. So there's definitely a lot that goes into it. I hope some of that answered some portion of your question.
Hey, thanks, yeah. And with that, it's a wrap. So thank you so much to our panel. This has been a great discussion, and reminder to us all to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Thank you.